Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I am Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are proud to bring you Senior Housing 101. Our speaker will discuss types of housing available, things to consider, funding, and how to choose a property. This information is vital as we start the process of discovering the best and most suitable living and/or care arrangement. Rick Graffagna is the local owner of Senior Solutions and has been helping families since 2012. He is thrilled to share some of this knowledge with you this evening. So with so much expertise and important information to share with us, Rick, I'm anxious to turn the screen over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Barry. And good evening, everybody. Thank you much for taking a little bit of time out of your Wednesday evening. I know the weather's getting a little nicer out there, and if you're a gardener like I am, you may have the itch to start doing stuff outside. But just wait another couple of days. It's still a little early to be doing too much. So why don't we jump in? And why am I not progressing here? Let's see.
You might need to click on the PowerPoint
Oh, there it
first.
is. Okay, it came up now. All right. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start out with just hopefully what you discover to be a humorous story. And I'm kind of sensitive. So even though I can't hear you laugh, if you maybe smile a little bit at home, that would be great. So there was a group of seniors that were on a bus trip, and they had left and were on the road for a half hour or so when one of the female passengers approached the driver of the bus and asked him if he would care for some peanuts. And he said, sure, that sounds great. So he extended his hand, and she gave him a handful of peanuts, and she went back to his seat. Well, a little while later, she approached him again and again asked him if he'd like some peanuts. He said, sure, they were really tasty. So he munched down his peanuts, and she repeated that, two or three more times. Finally, as she approached him, he said, I really, I think this is great, but I really don't want to eat all of your peanuts. And she said, well, that's okay. They're too hard on our teeth. We can't really chew the peanuts. And he said, oh, well, well, that's too bad, but why would you buy peanuts if you can't eat them? And she said, well, we really enjoy the chocolate around them. Sorry. So let's move on. Let's get started with the presentation. Again, my name is Rick Graffagna. I'm with Senior Solutions, and we're going to talk, a little bit about Senior Housing 101. And as Barry already suggested, if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, and we will be taking a pause periodically over the next period of time and see, and Barry will read those questions to me. So anyway, there are three retirement community financial models that I want to speak to. First one is called a buy-in. And if we were in person, I'd be asking you to raise your hand right now to see who knows or have heard of what a buy-in is, and ask you maybe to help me understand what that is. Have you explain to me what you think that is? So a buy-in community is one that has a fairly significant upfront dollar amount that you need to provide in order to gain access to that senior community. It's going to be some six-figure amount. Could be $150,000. It could be $250,000. It could be higher. It depends on which property or community you're expressing interest in. It depends on the style and size of the apartment. So a one-bedroom apartment is going to be less buy-in amount than, let's say, a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom. And so this is not a real estate transaction, so you're not getting a deed for this property, but you're providing this money to this institution so that there are some benefits to it, and so you can gain access or entry. So some of the benefits of a buy-in community is that you gain preferential access to other levels of care that are available, which we're going to speak to in a little bit. Other benefits are that you may have some pricing preferences and pricing benefits if you stay in the community. In some communities, there's a safety net that basically says that if you give us this buy-in amount, you can eat, and at some point you no longer have the financial capacity to pay the monthly fee, you can stay. Sometimes it's called a benevolent fund. Sometimes it's a life care plan that you purchase, and that so you got the comfort of knowing that regardless of what your financial situation is, years down the road, you found your final home. Now, there is oftentimes a percentage associated with this buying amount. It might be 70%, it might be 80%, it might be 90%. And what that means is that at the time of you leaving the community, whether you leave under your own accord because you decide to move somewhere else, or perhaps you pass away while you're there, that percentage of that upfront amount is returned either to you individually or to your beneficiary. So so for example, if your buy-in amount was $200,000 and the percentage was a 90% buy-in, then at that point, $180,000 would be returned to you or to your beneficiaries. There's other things involved with buy-ins, but I think that gives you a brief overview and an understanding of what the buy-in is. The next type of community financial model is what I call a community fee or a rental property. Um, Here, the entry fee or administration fee, depending on what they call it, is significantly less than the buy-in amount. It's a one-time non-refundable fee. Typically, it's a neighborhood of $2,000, $4,000, maybe $5,000, which helps pay for the overhead and upkeep of the property and refurbishment of the apartments. Um, and it's a rental in the sense that your monthly fee or rent, if you will, um, you pay on a monthly basis. In the state of Illinois, um, you're required that if you're in assisted living, you're really in what they call a month to month, and so you can give a 30-day notice. And even though it may have appeared that you have signed a 12-month lease, you can break that lease. And so if you move in July and you either decide to relocate to another property or perhaps you pass away, you can give a 30-day notice, regardless of where you're at in the calendar, and your financial burden comes to an end. You're no longer responsible for those monthly fees. So there's a lot of flexibility with this particular type of community. And then last is low income or affordable housing. This type of senior housing, which we'll speak a little bit more to in a little bit. Their rents are typically less than market rate. You may have a voucher from the county to help offset the full cost of rent, or they may have their rent tied to a percentage of what your income is. And so it's a great way for someone to get the support of senior housing, and not necessarily pay the full market rate. All right, so let's move on. So there's different types of retirement communities out there and different levels of care. The first one we're going to speak to is independent living. So as you would kind of guess by the title, independent living is for seniors that are independent. They don't really need any personal care support. They've got good mobility. They're still driving. They may still have they may still be working, whether it's a full-time job or a part-time job. They don't really need any help. They can kind of come and go as they please. So independent living, the senior would have their own apartment. Could be a studio, could be a 1-bedroom, could be a 2-bedroom. I was in a community yesterday that had 3-bedroom apartments. They come unfurnished, and you pay a base rent, and that rent gets you the apartment with a full kitchen. Takes care of utilities and housekeeping and maintenance. Oftentimes, laundry, washer and dryer are right in the apartment. If not, there's a washer and dryer readily available on your floor. I mentioned housekeeping and maintenance. Even though you have a full kitchen, there's typically a meal plan that's associated with your independent living apartment. There's a restaurant, or there's a dining room, if you will, that's served restaurant style, with a menu. And but it's typically not 3 meals a day. And so it might be 30 meals a month, or you might have a stipend to use on a weekly basis. But you have your full kitchen to supplement and prepare your own food and meals when, you know, you know, outside of the restaurant style dining. The rent also gets you activities and programming and local transportation. Now that COVID is starting to get under control, periodic outings to events and whatnot are starting to take place. So that's independent living. Now, the next is what I call independent living with services. For the, I don't know how many of you have heard the term activities of daily living, or ADLs. Those are things like bathing and dressing and grooming and transfer assistance and mobility support, medication reminders, things of that nature. So now let's say you're still in your same independent living apartment, but life threw you a curveball. Okay, let's say all of a sudden you need you're a little unsteady on your feet, and you're a little uncomfortable stepping into and out of the shower by yourself without someone being around. So you could hire either a caregiver, or you can have an employee of the community that you're living in be there for a shower assist. Okay, let's say you injure your shoulder somehow, and now you're having a little bit of difficulty, dressing and undressing. Well, you could schedule and hire a caregiver to come in the morning to make sure that you're dressed and ready to go, and help you towards the end of the day to get undressed and ready for bed. Um, Independent living with services works great as long as that service can be scheduled. So you can schedule a shower assist, you can schedule dressing, you can schedule, things like maybe a medication reminder. Those are all schedulable events. And as long as that event can be scheduled, you're appropriate to stay in that independent living apartment with services. Once you move to a point where you maybe need care 24/7, or maybe you're never quite certain when you're going to need help or be pushing that button to call for assistance, at that point, you may have to transition to an assisted living apartment. Now, depending on the community or the property that you've selected to live in, assisted living hopefully is right there. It might be a wing of the building that you're living in. It might be a separate building. It might be a floor in your independent living apartment building that's been converted and devoted to assisted living. An assisted living apartment very well could look very similar to your IL apartment. Could be a studio, could be a 1 bedroom, some cases could be a 2 bedroom. Physically, the biggest difference in an assisted living apartment is typically they do not come with full kitchens. Okay. So you have a base rent for the apartment, and that rent gets you 3 meals a day. So you don't really need that full kitchen to prepare meals. It comes with a kitchenette, which would be countertop and cabinets and a refrigerator and a sink. If you want to have a microwave or a hot plate or something like that, you can typically have that in assisted living. Uh, so the other features that you get with your base rent are very similar to independent living. You get, housekeeping and maintenance and cable television. Sometimes there's additional fee for a landline phone. Laundry services are included in your AL apartment. In some cases, not often, that washer dryer may be in the apartment, but typically, caregivers and supporting staff would help take care of your laundry services. In addition, you have local transportation and programming and activities and all of those things that are readily available in assisted living as well. So that's one component of the cost. The other component of the cost is going to be how much care does somebody need. And so that's going to be a function of an assessment that's been done for you. And they might have levels, or they may have accumulate points to determine what kind of help or how much help that you need. It really translates into how much time do their caregivers need to be with you through the course of the day to help you with your ADLs. whether that's bathing and dressing and grooming, medication management. Medication management is overseen by registered nurses. In most buildings, the registered nurses are in the building, if not 24/7 for a healthy part of the day. It might be from 6 in the morning until 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. They also have doctors that come and do rounds. They may not be there permanently, but they could be general practitioners or gerontologists, podiatrists, audiologists. Some dentists make visits. Dental hygienists may make visits into your assisted living apartment. Um, and again, like independent living, they're unfurnished, so you would bring your own furniture and decorate it, and bring as much as familiar items from your home to make this your new home, and to make it be comfortable with items that are familiar to you. Okay. Next is memory care. Okay. And again, similar to assisted living, your memory care solution could be right in the same building. It could be a wing, could be a floor that's been devoted to memory care. There are also standalone operators of memory care that all they do is memory care and work with people that have dementia or cognitive deficits. So in memory care, more often than not, the apartment style is a studio. There might be multiple sizes of studios. Sometimes they're unfurnished. Sometimes furnishings are provided for the residents. Um, so a couple of big distinctions between memory care offering and assisted living. One is from a security standpoint. Perhaps someone is exhibiting exit seeking or wandering. So memory care uh, units or buildings are secure. It's not locked down. At some point, if someone really has to get out because of a fire, you can do that, but there's going to be an alarm that goes off. So you can't readily access and or leave memory care. The other big difference in memory care is the training that the caregivers and staff receive, and the programming and the activities that are offered. In memory care, they are different by design than assisted living. There's more frequency of the programming and activities, less duration, a little bit less complex. They want the senior with dementia to be able to participate and feel successful in the activities, and because there's a frequency and there's more of them, that's one of the reasons that there are studios. There's a really residents are really encouraged to not spend a lot of time in their apartment. If they need to nap and obviously sleep at night or take care of toilet needs, yeah, sure, they're going to be in their apartment, but they like to have them part of the group, and even either actively participating in the programming or at least passively participating. And it allows the staff who's been trained to work with people with cognitive deficits. They know how to deal with behaviors, and they know how to redirect, and so they can allows them to have a little bit greater oversight because you're out mingling with the group. Next is what I call a continuing care retirement community, or CCRC. Again, if we were all face to face, I'd ask who's heard of a CCRC before. But a continuing care retirement community is senior housing, and typically it has all the levels of care that are available, all on one campus, one community under one umbrella. And so that would be like independent living, would be assisted living, it would be memory care, it would also be skilled nursing, which we'll speak to in a little bit. And typically your CCRCs are associated with the buy-in type of financial model. Not all the time, but most of the time. Okay, so that's what we consider a CCRC. And when I spoke about buy-ins before, and I mentioned about having access to the other levels of care, well, that's really what I was speaking to, so that you can transition from independent living to assisted living to memory care and to skilled nursing, either permanently or for short-term rehab. So next is a type of senior housing called supportive living. You may or may not have heard of this before. It's not necessarily well known. This is a program that's really a great one that's unique to the state of Illinois. Again, it's senior housing. Residents need to be 65 years or older. Um, they'd have their own apartment, could be a studio, could be a one-bedroom apartment. Comes with a kitchenette. You have an all-inclusive rent, so there's no separation of rent and care in supportive living. Comes with 3 meals a day, uh, laundry and maintenance and housekeeping and like I said, 3 meals a day, all very similar to the other types of housing that we've spoken to until this point. It can provide care for personal care items and ADLs, very similar to independent living with services. So as long as the service that someone needs support and help with can be scheduled, then you're appropriate to stay living in supportive living. There's a mobility requirement. The resident really needs to be able to stand and pivot. And whether that's to get up out of a chair to get to a walker to ambulate the apartment or to get to a wheelchair, essentially someone needs to be able to navigate through their apartment by themselves effectively to be able to get to the restroom and take care of their toileting needs. Um, so now there are a couple. So the big difference with supportive living is on the financial payment aspect of things. So the types of housing we've talked about up to this point: independent living and IL with services, assisted living, memory care, continuing care, retirement communities. These are all private pay only options. Okay, and so they accept obviously private pay. Supportive living, if at some point, either at the outset or you don't have the ability to pay the monthly rent, which also includes care, you can apply for and transition to Medicaid and stay living there. Okay. Whereas Medicaid is not a potential payer for the other types of housing that we've spoken to already. Okay. Next, affordable senior housing. Touched on that a little bit as a financial model. Typically, affordable senior housing is apartments for seniors. They typically do not have services. They may have a house manager that's there to help and provide guidance, or a social worker. Often they come with full kitchens. Typically, dining is not part of the senior affordable senior housing. But it can be a great option for someone if perhaps they no longer want to manage their single family home and they want to transition into at least a stepping stone for senior housing. One of the big challenges with affordable senior housing is supply and demand. There's not as much supply as the demand would call for, and in many cases there are pretty significant wait lists in order to gain access. And finally, skilled nursing for both rehabilitation or long-term. I touched on that a little bit ago relative to the CCRC. So there's a couple, 3 reasons why someone would be in skilled nursing, okay, or a nursing home, depending on how you want to refer to it. One would be for rehab. So potentially, let's say you fell, you injured your hip, maybe you broke it, you spent 3 midnights, as an admitted patient in the hospital, and now you're going to go to rehab for some short-term rehab in skilled nursing. You're going to be paid for by Medicare. You've got potential 100 days of rehabilitation. Quite honestly, that doesn't happen on a very rare occasion now. Typically, the average length of stay for rehab is about 14 to 16 days. So that's on a short-term basis. Long-term, people can end up in skilled nursing for a couple of reasons. One, financially, if at some point you no longer have the capacity to pay financially in the private pay options, or your level of care makes you no longer suitable to stay in supportive living, you can go long-term into skilled nursing. That becomes your new home, and Medicaid becomes the payer. So you find a property that will allow you to have a Medicaid bed in their facility. The other reason that someone could end up in skilled nursing could be because of the physical malady that they're dealing with. Assisted living can handle many, many things. A few things that you cannot be dealing with. And in assisted living are a 2+ assist. Perhaps a heavy weight situation, level 3 or 4 wound. You're on a ventilator, a feeding tube, a respirator. Some pretty significant physical needs cannot be attended to in assisted living or senior housing. Um, and so then those would have to be addressed in skilled nursing. Going back to the private pay arena, I didn't mention before, that can truly be an end of life solution for you or a family member. If at some point, your health declines and hospice is called for, hospice can be brought right into your senior living property. Okay. And and there's something else I wanted to say too. Oh, in addition to the doctors and the nurses that are in the buildings, there's also therapy agencies there. So if you're in the skilled nursing for short-term rehab and you go back to your home in assisted living, uh, therapy can follow you. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, paid for under Medicare Part B, can continue back in your home. Okay. So, Barry, any questions at this point?
Uh, Well, this is a great time just to remind people to go ahead and open that Q&A window if you'd like to ask some questions. One person commented from the beginning, they're a new resident to Wheaton from Joliet, so we certainly want to welcome you. And he comments that after your great story, he may never eat peanuts again. So it.
Good. I'm glad somebody chuckled a little bit.
Yeah. I was wondering, Rick, how does that transition between the different levels of care, how is that determined? Is that by the staff at the facility? Is it by the individual loved ones? Who makes those determinations?
That's a great question, Barry. It's really a team effort. Okay. I mean, so anybody that's living in senior housing, your family members are actively communicating over time with the staff. And so it's not a surprise, especially if someone's transitioning, let's say from assisted living to memory care. Okay. Which is sometimes the case. And so, there's observations and there's feedback going back and forth about maybe some changes in your loved one. And, there's an assessment that takes place to really determine, if maybe someone would be better off in a memory care setting. If someone has dementia and assisted living, a deal breaker really is if they start showing tendencies to be for exit seeking and wandering, that really ends up kind of forcing the issue that someone needs to be in memory care. But yeah, that's a good question. It's the combination of the caregivers, it's the nurses, it's the staff, it's the family members, all kind of providing input to leading up to that decision.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions. But of course, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to open up that Q&A window and see and enter those. And
Great.
we'll stop again for questions in a couple of minutes.
Super. Okay, so let's move on. So if you're considering senior housing, so what are some of the key items you want to consider? Well, location typically is, if it's not number one, it's number two. And so, people are moving, let me untie my tongue. So location is really important. Whether you want to stay close to where you've been living for the last 30, 40, 50 years, to maintain relationship with friends, with doctors, with churches, with shopping, that's certainly a consideration. Oftentimes people want to, location, they want to choose somewhere where perhaps other family members are. Let's say the kids have moved to suburbs, not close to where they grew up, and you want to be closer to them. Or perhaps at some point you elected to relocate down to Florida, and now, life's thrown you a couple of curveballs and you need to move back and you want to be closer to family members so they can provide that safety net. I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last several years, there's been a tremendous surge in building new senior housing properties. Okay. And it's not quite like a Walgreens or a CVS where they're on every corner, but It's getting more and more to the benefit of the consumer and the customer that you're going to be able to find a senior housing option that fits your needs closer to where you want to be than several years might have been the case. So location is always important. Next is level of care. I mean, what are the health services that are provided? We talked about independent living and assisted living and memory care. I always try to recommend to families that, you try to move somewhere that's going to have the, as best as you can project, all the services that you're going to need. So for example, let's say that there's an early onset of dementia as a diagnosis, but maybe someone's not really appropriate or ready or need to be in full blown a memory care setting. Um, and you're going into assisted living. Well, perhaps it makes sense to go into an assisted living community that also has memory care as an option. So just in case something happens and now you need that more formal dementia support, you don't have to pick up and relocate to a whole new property. Those services are readily available for you. Lifestyle and amenities. This is your new home, and so what do they do for fun? What are the things that they do for activities? In some cases, not a lot, but sometimes there's swimming pools, and so if you like to swim, you maybe want to look for that kind of a property. Or if you're pretty active and you like to exercise, look at the exercise rooms that they have. What kind of equipment do they have readily available for for their residents? Cost. Obviously, cost is going to be a factor, right? And so, I always suggest that not only do you focus on what the cost of where you're going is today, but what does it look like down the road, or what it could possibly look like down the road. So if you're independent right now, what does the assisted living apartments cost? What does the cost of care at that time look like? If you're moving into assisted living and perhaps there's a potential for memory care down the road, what does that memory care solution look like? Not that it's going to be absolutely the same when you do make that decision if you have to, but at least that from a budgeting standpoint and having some numbers in the back of your head, you kind of have an idea. The food, by a show of hands, even though I can't see you, who likes food? I enjoy food. Um, quite honestly, folks, the food in senior housing is really good. Typically served restaurant style, with a menu, many options, almost all cooked from scratch right there on the property. Good variety, good selection, and it really is pretty good. Kind of ties back into lifestyle and amenities, but what are the activities like? What do they do for outings? Do they go shopping? Do they periodically go to restaurants, uh, uh, theater, movies, things of that nature? Do they have local transportation? Do they provide it? Is it free? Do they have a limit on the restrictions? Sometimes there might be, a mileage restriction. So they'll take you anywhere within a 10-mile radius of their building. If you want to go out further, there may be a small fee. Do they provide transportation for shopping? Do they provide transportation for medical appointments? I'm working with a situation right now where mom gets dialysis 3 times a week. So one of the key questions is, what is there transportation available to help get her to her dialysis needs 3 times a week? Staffing, key questions. Ask about the staff. Um, how long have they been there? How long has the executive director been there? How long is the director of assisted living and the director of nursing and the marketing person that you're dealing with? What's the levels of staffing levels look like? They should be able to give you a ratio of how many caregivers per resident do they deal with. Are all the employees, are all the staff their own employees, or do they have staffing issues, and do they bring in staffing agencies to help supplement where they can't hire? These are all very valid and important questions that you should be inquiring about. What do the buildings and grounds look like? When you're going to do a tour for a property, once you pull into the parking lot, your visit or tour, if you will, has begun. So you should be checking things out like, how well, is the grass maintained? And, what do the weeds look like? Are there fresh flowers? And in the winter, is the parking lot plowed very well? Is the ice been removed appropriately? When you walk into the building, is it clean? Does it smell good? Has it been recently painted? Is the carpeting well maintained? Are, are all the light fixtures on and well lit? So you should be, that's a reflection of the pride that they have in their building, and things that you should be looking at, as a, prospectively looking at this community as your new home. Oh, how did food get in there again? Well, it's because I enjoy food, so I thought I would put it in there, and I know it's pretty important. I remember this is going back a few years. I was working with a client. Her name was Dorothy, and Dorothy was 95 at the time. And we were going to look at a couple of senior housing options for her. And she asked me pretty specifically. She said, "Well, how is the food where we're going?" And I told her that's pretty good. And I said, "So why do you ask?" And she said, "Well, when you're 95, you don't have much else to look forward to than the food. So it really needs to be important." But food is important. I mean, not only for the quality and for your sustenance, but it's really a key part of the socialization and the social activity that takes place in the community. Security and safety. Um, you know, how often do they have somebody at the front desk? What are the hours? Can I come and visit after hours? How does that work? Do I have my own key? Do I need to call somebody to get into the building? When is the front door locked? How do they handle training for residents and for staff for things like tornado drills or fire drills? So these are all, some other considerations that you should be thinking about. And then future needs addressed. This kind of ties back to item number 2, the level of care. You should try to think not only for what your needs are today, but down the road. I remember a few years ago, I was working with a family, and they really loved the property, and dad, loved it, and mom was going to stay at home. Mom had some early onset dementia. The place where they elected to put dad in for assisted living did not have memory care as an option. Change in plans unforeseen to the family. Shortly after dad moved into assisted living, mom decided to follow him into assisted living apartment. And shortly thereafter, she declined pretty quickly and needed a memory care solution. So they had to pack their bags and physically relocate to a whole new senior property. So to the degree that you can anticipate and try to understand what's around the corner, you should try to do so. So when is it time to move? This is not an easy question, and it really varies dramatically from one family to the next. Um, and a lot of times it's a situation. You know, in some cases it's safety. Perhaps there's been dad's become a fall risk, right? And he's living at home, and the kids are having trouble sleeping through the night, wondering if dad has fallen and can't get up. Sorry for the choice of words. Um, Sometimes there's dementia issues, where moms, maybe decline pretty quickly over time, and keeping her at home is no longer a safe situation. Touched on geography and location earlier. Perhaps family has really separated quite a bit, and the support and safety net of the family is no longer readily accessible, and moving closer to where that support can be a driving factor. And sometimes there's costs involved. Staying at home, I'm a strong proponent of that. And we're going to touch on home care here a little bit later. But there's costs associated with bringing caregivers into the home. And, sometimes the combination of the caregivers and maintaining the house and paying utilities and buying food and all the costs that are associated with having your own home, outstrip and can run significantly higher than an assisted living solution might look like. So Barry, any questions before I move on to the next slide, which I already did, but that's okay.
Yes, again, cost is such an issue. Someone is asking which sort of living situation might be a viable option for a senior with an income of approximately, say, 50,000 per year, and uh, the person continues that it seems like a lot of the housing is either low income or, on the other side of the spectrum, very expensive. They visited a CCRC and it seemed to require a very large amount to even get in, probably assuming that the person was going to sell their home.
Right, right. So, so what I tell families is that, so a couple of numbers, to maybe make a mental note of. So your typical independent living apartment in our area, let's just say it's going to be average, $3,000 to $3,500 a month. Okay. In assisted living, with an average size apartment with average amount of care might be in the $5,500 to $6,000 a month. For memory care, depending on the property, add another $1,000 to that assisted living kind of cost. So those are some general numbers that you can, keep in mind. The supportive living option, an apartment in supportive living, which includes some care, could be in the $4,500 to $4,800 a month range. But then if you can't afford that monthly fee, you can transition to Medicaid. So there's some general, I mean, there's a margin for error for all the numbers I just gave you, but that's something you can think about. Unfortunately, senior housing is not inexpensive. It's just relatively expensive. There's some that are more expensive than others. I hope I answered your question.
Right. Well, and I guess the follow on from that, are most communities either the buy in model or the month to month? Or could you look at either of those options at most of the different communities?
Yeah, I think the vast majority of your options out there are rental. There's a smaller number of the buying communities. Certainly, people's financial, if someone has the ability to put $300,000 up for a buy-in, unfortunately, it's not just that amount of money that they're looking for. They're also looking for an additional $300,000 or $400,000 in net worth, in order to become acceptable, to move into a buy-in. And everybody's situation is a little bit different. When I work with a family, I try to help them understand what the cost is and what what the prognosis looks like in terms of how long their money is going to last, and we can make some determinations based off of that. Because
Right.
there's a lot of solutions.
Great, great. Thank you. Okay, well, again, to our uh, attendees, keep the questions coming. But for right now, we'll let Rick go ahead with the presentation.
So next, my slide isn't working right because you got to see everything all at the same time. But so what's senior housing like today? A heck of a lot better than it was 3 months ago. Okay. Most, if not all, communities are wide open for business and accepting new move-ins. Family tours and visitation to check out properties, is now pretty wide open. You can tour. Sometimes there might be a person limit, like the most 2 or 3 people at a time, but you can do in-person tours, whereas 2 or 3 months ago, if you couldn't do a tour, most of them were virtual. I mentioned that, part of the process to get into assisted living or memory care is there's an assessment done typically by a nurse to determine what your needs are. More often not that's now being done face to face, but sometimes virtually. The move-in process still been modified a little bit. A lot of times they may just allow 2 or 3 people at one time, combination of movers and family members to help with the move-in and getting the apartment set up. Uh, New resident isolation period, that's been greatly modified. Hopefully everybody in the calls already received their vaccine, but if there's a senior moving into senior housing and you've been vaccinated and you have a negative COVID test just prior to move in, there's no limits to your your move in. There's no isolation that's called for. Family visitations are back. Instead of having to, either look through a window or visit outside, They're greatly increased and maybe not 100% wide open, but family visitations are now allowed, and that's just fabulous. Employee and resident health is monitored still. I know of some properties that are still doing COVID testing of their staff on a regular basis. Um, Activities and group dining is back. May not be as congested as it was before. So instead of maybe 4 people at a table, it might be 2 people at a table. And instead of maybe having 25 or 30 people involved in an activity, it might be 12 to 15, to maintain some social distancing. But activities and group dining is back. Um, COVID vaccine administration in buildings is pretty much completed. I would say way north of 90% of residents and staff have all been vaccinated. And, knock on wood, if the trends continue and mitigations are reduced, from a governmental guidance standpoint, we'll be, if we're not 100% back to normal, we're going to be real close. So what kind of payments are accepted in senior housing? One, private pay. I mentioned that to you before in terms of independent living and assisted living, memory care, your CCRCs. Medicaid or public aid. There are 2 situations in the state of Illinois where Medicaid can be the payer for someone to live in senior housing. One, to refresh your memory, is supportive living, and the other would be long-term Medicaid bed in a skilled nursing setting. Medicare um, doesn't help pay for, well, let me put it to you this way. Medicare continues the same in a senior housing setting as if you were at home. Okay, it's still going to pay for hospitalization, doctor's visits, rehabilitation and skilled nursing, your prescription drugs, physical therapy back at home or in your apartment. All of that continues. That doesn't change at all. Medicare unfortunately does not help pay for long-term senior housing, but everything that it paid for up until this point continues going forward. So how can I fund these payments? Social Security income, pension. If you had the benefit of working for an organization that had a pension, and that's hopefully providing some monthly income for yourself. Depending on how life treated you over time, if you were able to put some money aside and have some investments, now's the time that you can start using them, to help pay for your long-term senior housing. Many people are sitting on a healthy amount of equity in their home. They've lived there for 30, 40 years. The mortgage has been paid off. Hopefully there's been some price appreciation over time. The sale of that home and the proceeds can go a long way towards helping pay for senior housing. Again, with a show of hands, I'm wondering how many in the audience have long-term care insurance. So with a group about our size, I would say on average, maybe 1 or 2 people. If you're young enough and you can explore the idea of adding long-term care insurance, if you're an adult child that's in the audience, you may want to explore that. The long-term care insurance industry has changed and shifted over time. There's some hybrid policies that are available. Sometimes there's some convertibility from maybe some cash that's been accumulated in a whole life insurance plan. But long-term care insurance can be great. It can help pay, if not for all of senior housing, but it can pay for a healthy chunk. If you do have a long-term care insurance policy and perhaps haven't looked at it for a while, might be time to pull it out just to see exactly what it covers. What's the per diem? Is there a cap on the total dollar amounts? A lot of times there's a wait period of maybe 60 or 90 days before you can access the benefit. And then, what type of housing and care does it actually pay for? Veterans benefits. Haven't spoken to this yet, but if you're a military veteran, served during a time of war, was honorably discharged, you could be eligible for a benefit called aid and attendance. It's a monthly stipend, pension, if you will, for an individual senior that's a military veteran could be worth up to $1,800 or $1,900 a month. It can also apply to a surviving spouse. I think their benefit would be like about $1,300 or $1,400 a month. There's a financial hurdle that's required, but it could be a benefit that you're eligible for. Irregardless of when you served in the military, as a veteran, you're potentially eligible for up to 12 hours of home care provided for you. So that's one of the common questions I ask for in every situation. I ask, are we dealing with somebody that's a military veteran to see if there's some benefits available. Oftentimes there's lines of credit or bridge loans, especially, if you've got a significant amount of equity that's devoted, built up in your home, there may be ways of accessing those funds. Life insurance conversion, if you have a whole life policy and if you accumulated a significant amount of cash, some of that could be made available for long-term for senior housing. And then, depending on how well your kids are doing, they could end up helping supplement what you need. I know in my particular case, that will not be the case. My wife and I are on our own. Okay, so other items of importance. Mentioned veterans benefits once. I think it's important to mention it again. If you are a veteran, there's a variety of benefits that could be eligible for, and either get guidance from the VA, or I work with a number of people that are very knowledgeable about it and can provide some assistance. Elder law and estate planning. In some cases, we're going to mention here a little bit, but end of life documents may not be in place. Power of attorney for both healthcare and property, really important to have in place. Perhaps you're planning to transition to Medicaid at some point, and maybe some estate planning is necessary to help make sure that you're properly prepared for that transition. There are attorneys and lawyers that specialize working with seniors, and they're generally speaking, they're really great people. Again, talked about power of attorney and healthcare directives. I talked with a family last week and with their adult kids, and asked about power of attorney, and dad is 88 and mom is 86, and the response relative to the power of attorney was, yeah, we've been meeting to do that. I said, well, now is really a key time to get that document signed, especially as while your parents and your loved ones have the mental capacity to sign. Once they no longer have capacity, and it becomes a little bit more difficult and challenging to get those documents in place. Been in the house for a long time. Maybe you don't know anybody that can help sell the house, but real estate services are certainly readily available to help sell the home. As you may or may not be aware, how real estate market is really hot right now. So homes are selling really quickly, and in many cases at appreciated price points. So who has stuff? I have a lot of stuff. Okay. And so when we go and move, hopefully there's going to be someone around to help me deal with the stuff, and there are services available. And so you don't need to be overwhelmed. All right. There are downsizing services that can help, either through estate sales or donations or garage sales, help you get, rid of the things that you wouldn't be able to take with you to senior housing. They can also assist with the packing and the moving process, because it can be pretty daunting to think about leaving a house that you've been in for quite a number of years. In-home care. Touched on that a little bit earlier. Professionally and personally, I'm really a strong proponent for keeping people at home as long as it makes sense. On a personal note, my mom is 91. She's still living in the original home in Elgin, doing great. But she's kind of unique. If at some point someone needs a little help with some ADLs, there are in-home caregivers that are out there. I work with a lot of wonderful companies, agencies that have been licensed by the state of Illinois. They can provide caregivers in the home. They've been trained, they've been background checked, they've got um, the general liability and workers' compensation insurance taken out, so liability has been addressed. And they can do just about anything relative to your activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, grooming. They're non-medical, okay? So they can't do things that are medically intrusive, like take blood, draw blood, take a temperature, give physical therapy or occupational therapy. They can't administer medication. They can observe medications being taken, and they can remind, but they can't physically pass them out. They can do other things in the house too. They can do light housekeeping, meal preparation. They can run errands. They can do shopping. They can take the seniors they're working with to medical appointments, things of that nature. And typically, there's two types of caregiver. You could have them on shift work, where you're paying them an hourly rate to be there for a specific period of time. Maybe it's 3 hours in the morning or 3 hours at night, or maybe it's 4 hours in the middle of the day. They can really tailor the schedule around what the need is. The other type of caregiver is one that, because of the amount of help that someone needs, they can be living in the home as a 24/7 caregiver. And instead of being priced on an hourly basis, they're priced out on a daily basis. The key with that solution is that there's got to be a separate bedroom that caregiver can call their own, and they need to be able to get 6 or 7 hours of quiet time at night to sleep. And so, if the senior is up a lot at night, and need assistance from the caregiver, that solution may not work. So that's caregiver, in-home care. And then another, not well-known service is adult day services. There's some wonderful businesses out there that, if you want, mom or dad to go somewhere through the course of the day, typically Monday through Friday, and be with other seniors, to have oversight, to have activities and programming, to be in a safe environment, to have lunch provided, adult day services can be a great option. So how do you go about finding communities? You can do the looking yourself. You can ask family and friends. They might have some input in terms of what they've heard and what they've seen. You can do this thing called Google. You can go out on the internet and do the search hunting yourself. There are some senior specific related websites out there that can help with the search. There's some online senior placement agencies that can help you connect with the properties that make sense for you. And then there's also some local senior placement companies like Senior Solutions, which is my company. So I'll give you 30 seconds about me. I've been helping families since 2012. I'm kind of like a matchmaker. I help connect families to the situations that make the most sense based off of key things like budget and level of care and geography and lifestyle and things of that nature. My services are free. My compensation comes from the properties that I work with. They compensate me on a referral basis, and I work with the vast, vast majority of them out there. You know what? I've developed a lot of knowledge over time, and if people like to call and just get educated and understand more about their options, I'm certainly very willing and want to do that to help people, get to a better place than where they're at right now. So this is my contact information. Feel free to call me at any time if you'd like. 630-246-2579. That's my email address on my website if you'd like to check it out. And are there any questions out there? Hopefully this has been a productive use of your evening.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Rick. And just as a reminder, I will be sending out this contact information to everyone who has registered for the program. So they will have that information. And if you are watching this recording at a later date, I will be happy to send that information to you as well. You would just contact me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE like community engagement. We did have one other question, and at this time I'll remind people, if you have a question, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. But the question that was answered, Rick, or asked Rick, is you mentioned a couple of websites to help locate various types of housing. are there any in particular that you can recommend or have found that people have found helpful?
There's yeah, there are. I think it would be easier for you to just, I'm kind of like a living website. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. But I would just Google senior housing. A lot of times people just Google senior housing in a town, so you might just, go senior housing Wheaton, and you're going to get populated with a lot of information that way.
Great, great. And as you said, your services are free. And I've, with the other senior living centers that I'm in contact with, just in the course of my position, they always talk about how great you are to work with. So would definitely recommend that communicating with you. So again, if anyone has a last minute question, you can go ahead and enter that in the Q&A, but otherwise it looks like it is right at the top of the hour. So thank you so much, Rick. We really appreciate all the time and effort that goes into these presentations. As I mentioned, we will be sending out Rick's contact information, everything that you see here on the screen, and that will go out to everyone who has registered for this program. If you are watching the recording of this program and would like that information, just email me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE like community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. So once again, we say thank you to you, Rick. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight. We hope everyone stays safe and look forward to seeing you again soon. Good
Thanks
night.
a lot, Barry. Appreciate you allowing me to do that. Have a great evening, everybody.